Okay, Jenny, you are welcome to go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. And I'm so happy to be here. I feel grateful that Cece asked me to co-host this educational webinar. I think it's really important to have these opportunities and that we get the word out as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. And I feel like Cece's educational platforms do that wonderfully. So my name is Jenny DeMarco. I am the co-founder of Virginians for Safe Technology. We formed in 2020. And my background is actually like before this, I knew absolutely nothing about this issue. So it's been like drinking through a fire hose. Um, I my undergrad degree is in broadcast journalism from Boston University. And actually my mom's half of the family is all from Massachusetts, the Worcester, Framingham, South Shore area. So I do have a lot of ties to your wonderful state. Um, but I really didn't know anything about this. So I got into broadcast journalism at BU, and then I went and got my master's in education at a small school in Ohio. I was choosing whatever school I could coach basketball at because I played basketball at Boston University. So, and then after that, I for about 10 years I spent in the news or the television industry, really. So I worked behind and in front of the camera. I was an anchor slash reporter for local news stations. And then I ended my career at C-SPAN here in Washington, D.C., producing for their book television shows. Um, and then after that, I started my own health and wellness business. And fast forward to now, I'm a mom of two, and I was on the way I got into this really is I fell into it. I was on a call with Zen Honeycutt because I am concerned about a lot of other health issues that are going on currently. And she happened to be talking at that point, it must have been February 2020. Or no, maybe it was even March 2020. So she happened to be talking at that point. She was fighting cell phone towers in her local area, and that's when she lived in California. And she was talking all about 5G. She was talking about the issues with wireless, and I was floored. I had no idea. And I remember being on that call saying, well, what can we do? What can we do? Because I immediately, with my background in television, you just see a lot of the news. And then with my background in C-SPAN, I saw how the government handles things. And I just saw the landscape of what was to come if people were unaware of this. And I said, what do we do? What can we do? And she kept saying over and over again, just start a group, just start a group. And I was nervous. I really didn't know anything about this, but that night I got on Facebook and I started Virginians for Safe Technology. And then some people ended up finding me a couple months later, and we officially started Virginians for Safe Technology. So here we are. Fast forward to today. It's Within that time, I also started something called the National Call for Safe Technology with Odette Wilkins. And it's a biweekly call just to come together and educate and to talk about what's going on in our communities and share ideas and action steps. And we in Virginia are currently working on the smart meter issue. You may or may not have heard about the utility meters called smart meters. There are a whole host of issues that come along with smart meters, and we're working on that. We're also working on wireless in schools and a couple other things here in the community. So just a quick background on me, and I will toss it to Cece from
Ah,
here.
all right. Let me just get over here. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing how you fell down the rabbit hole. Indeed, none of us ever came onto this planet and said, I'm going to grow up to be a technology advocate for
No.
safety. It just, you know, so we're so very grateful. And we have groups like this all over the country because once you know that we've got a problem with wireless, most people, like you said, are like, I didn't know about this. What are we going to do? And then we find our way into, well, you know what? There is something that we can do with this. So I will go ahead and spend the next hour to hour and a half going through a set of slides that we are going to send out to everybody who registered, along with the recording that we're making right now. And in my slides, you'll see lots of links. So we say, don't take our word on any of this. Get to know it for yourself. But if anything that I've done over the last 10 years to figure out how to connect the dots quickly can help you to come up to speed quickly, then by all means, use whatever resources we can put in front of you. And that I hope to get out by tomorrow. And you are more than welcome to reach Jenny at Virginians for Safe Technology or me at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. So give me just a moment and I'm going to bring us over to our slides. Just one sec. And let me go into big screen mode. Okay, let me come back to Zoom now. And I will do my share screen. Yeah, I wish I had a wizard behind behind the curtain over here to, to get us going more smoothly. But, you know, low budget, we do what we can. Okay. Jenny, can you give me a nod when you can see my screen? Okay, so these are the slides that we'll send out to everybody who registered, and you're welcome to share them with others. And again, we're gonna, like Jenny said, it's kind of like drinking water through a fire hose when you first learn about this issue. But just know for every problem that we have managed to create, there is a solution. So don't do it alone. Jenny's advice from Zen Honeycutt, who runs Moms Across America, is spot on. Don't go it alone. Get a group formed and we'll teach you how to do that today too. So many great tools for us. So that MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned my undergrad in communication. And like we said, we never imagined this is what we would be using our communication skill sets for today. But thank goodness that Jenny has the skill set that she has, and that I have the skill set that I have, and that others have completely different skill sets that all converge together to be able to put this information into a cohesive way that we can all pool our expertise and see what we can get done. So I have two grown daughters. They're in their 20s now. And when they were little, our education foundation had gone defunct. And so I stepped up and revived our local education foundation. And this was right when the industry was pushing in that 21st century classroom to our schools. And our budgets in our little town of Ashland, Massachusetts had been cut to the bone for years. And we didn't have the funding to get all this new technology that we were being told our kids would need to succeed in the world. So, you know, good doobie parents. I jumped in, I revived the Ed Foundation, started doing grant writing to get wireless infrastructure, to get iPads and Chromebooks and smart boards and minis, and what we thought was all this great new technology. Then one night at my book group, my girlfriend Wendy, who's an electrical engineer, she was reading something else called Zapped, a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman. And she's telling us, you know what, you guys, I think there's something wrong with Wi-Fi. And it was book group, so I just made a mental note of it. But not long after that, something else crossed my desk inferring the same thing. And by then I was the grant coordinator for my children's school district. And I had discovered Donors Choose as crowdsourcing for teachers. I just sunk my teeth into Donors Choose. We got over 100 projects funded to get our teachers what they need in the classroom. And a lot of it was wireless technology. So I was in up to my eyeballs in wireless tech in my kids' schools. So once I saw this come past me a second time, I'm like, gee, maybe I need to pay attention to something here. So I'm a tech writer. So I'm like, is there any science to this? And we will share the science with you today. And I was astounded to find literally thousands of peer-reviewed studies all over the world showing extensive harm. So it was not an easy conversation to have, especially a decade ago. But when I brought the evidence forward, our schools became the first in the nation to even have this little sign over here with best practices for mobile devices. And Turn off the devices when not in use. Common sense once you know something is radiating. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when you need it. Always place the mobile device on a solid surface and keep your distance. You know, when I was a little girl, my mom knew enough to say, hey, stand back from that TV. Don't stand right in front of there, because it had its own electromagnetic field that was stronger than our own bodies, and it could cause us some harm. So that's where my journey began. So we have this little sign hanging in our school district, but it turns out they weren't actually enforcing it. So I met with my state senator, Karen Spilka, and I went to local coffee hours, and I showed her the science. I showed her our little sign. And by then I had invested in a meter to measure these invisible waves that take our data and our signal back and forth. And I'm showing her the sign. And then I measured her cell phone and her district director's laptop. And both devices flew right into the red zone, off the charts. And they're looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. It's going to be like drugs and alcohol and pornography and tobacco and gambling. Adults will make the choices they choose to make, but we're obliged to protect our collective children. So Senator Spilka put me in touch with an attorney in her office. She was then the chairwoman of Senate Ways and Means, which is a very powerful position. But she plays completely by the books, and I completely respect her for that. So she puts me with this attorney. We whittled out a little bill that would form a commission to bring the right minds together at the state level and figure this out. So we did that back in 2014. My bill was introduced in 2015, and it's now been 10 years that we've had a lot of legislation filed in our state, and it's gone nowhere. It's come out of committee a couple of times, but then it goes to the next committee and just dies. So we have never informed the public in Massachusetts, which is why I do what I do, to create these educational opportunities so we all at least have the right to know, which then gives us the right to choose. So in a few minutes, we'll also talk about what we've done in New Hampshire, because they got a law passed in 7 months to investigate this issue. And we've been 10 years. And I think there's just too much industry influence here. So, so the legislative work I've done, and then there's Dr. Deborah Davis, who is a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change. She's one of our country's top scientists. She's worked in all sorts of governmental agencies. She had no idea that wireless radiation was brought to market with no biological safety testing, and that it is extraordinarily harmful. So she began to investigate this issue, and she has established arguably the world's greatest think tank and research repository on this, called the Environmental Health Trust. And somebody over in Europe who's also in technology had also seen that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, these are the doctors who get all the environmental illnesses, the conundrum cases that regular doctors were never trained on. She had seen that they put out a position statement. I had seen that, and these folks in Europe had seen that, saying, do not allow wireless into our children's schools. Stay with cabled connections. And so when this group in the UK reached out to Dr. Davis to say, may we have your permission to reference your website, the Environmental Health Trust, for an online course that we want to develop, because they realized we can't fix this unless people know the issue exists. So Dr. Davis said, yes, and you might want to talk to this woman, Cece Doucette in Massachusetts. She's making some interesting inroads. So I partnered with these folks in Europe, and we came up with a very quick half-hour online course that we can literally train your entire company, your entire school district, your entire municipality in about a half an hour online. So we established this little nonprofit out of Europe, and we have off-the-shelf training ready to go. And Dr. Davis brought a panel of world-leading experts to the State House in Massachusetts to ask for right-to-know legislation. And up until that point, I was 2 years into my journey, and I didn't have anybody I could speak to. I was completely self-taught on this. So it was really gratifying to go to the Massachusetts State House and then to a community forum they did that night in Framingham, Massachusetts, and be in a room that was standing room only of people all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who knew this issue existed. So I connected with a bunch of those folks, and then I built a website called Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And if you go there, we've got a very rich resources page. We've got a state level page that shows all the inroads we're making with our state agencies, lawsuits that are happening. And now I hold a regular monthly meeting where people from all over the country come, sometimes from other countries as well. And we brainstorm, we share what we've been doing, we share what's working, we learn from our lessons failed, and keep moving ourselves along. And somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work back in 2018 and reached out to ask if I would co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institutes of Health. And I did, and I was able to build out a really nice panel. We had Theodora Scarrato, who is the executive director of Dr. Davis's Environmental Health Trust. She came to tell us what other countries are already doing to protect their children. We are here in the country where industry rules, and we have done nothing but give them a wireless tablet during the pandemic to access their education with no safety training. We're now seeing industry put cell towers and 5G small cells right on school property, and they have penetrated all of our school buildings with wireless access points everywhere in that building. And the electropollution is incredibly, incredibly thick right now. And so many children and adults are getting very ill. So we're very grateful that we had Theodora Scarrato to tell us about other countries. We had Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. In his retirement, he was approached by some of the scientists, and they measured in his own home what this radiation is doing. And he, being a very good man, did his investigation, reached out to a dozen of the world's leading scientists and doctors and other experts, and came back and said, our public radiation limits in North America are not safe. And so bless him, he should just be enjoying his cushy retirement, but he has been up in Parliament in Canada trying to do what we're trying to do here in the US to force our corrupt federal agencies to bring the science and public policy in line. So we also had Dr. Martin Pall, and he is one of the world's leading scientists. And what's nice about this link to the NIH conference is that we only had like 8 to 10 minutes each to speak. So it's a really quick way to show people the credibility on this issue. And then we also had Peter Sullivan. Now, I came across Peter's work online. I was watching some of his lectures, and he's got a really interesting background. He used to be a fighter pilot like Top Gun. So he was up with the Earth's really high natural electromagnetic fields. They're much lower down here on the Earth, but up in the plane, you're up in that, in a plane with radar on it. And this is what today's technology is. It started as radar in our military, and it's two-way radio frequency, microwave radiation. So there's poor Peter up in that plane with the Earth's high fields, the radiation on the outside of the plane for the radar systems, and then all the instrumentation inside the plane to be able to communicate with, land. So Peter wound up getting very sick. He lost a lot of weight. His bones, his teeth started getting really brittle. And then as his two sons came up through the preschool years, each of them was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And when I was watching Peter's lecture, I was just stunned when he said that his sons are no longer on the autism spectrum. And I didn't even know that was a possibility. But apparently there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline. It didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in the environment. So he will tell people, you know, a lot of parents of family members with autism will go toward the clean organic diet to start reducing the stress load on the body and the brain. They may do the heavy metal detox to start pulling all those chemicals and toxins out of the organs. Today, he will tell people as a first line of defense, do the digital detox. And for his family, they would shut everything off in the house for 12 hours a night. And ultimately, those two boys were able to recover. They grew up. They both went to college. They're well-adjusted young members of our society now. So that was a shocker to me. But it's amazing the story we hear one after another. When we just give people the right to know, they will make their choices and go, wow, who knew that headache or those nosebleeds or the insomnia or the anxiety or the depression? Who knew it was because I'm pulsating myself with microwaves all day and night? So we'll walk you through the science, but this is a really good resource to establish very quick credibility. And then one of the major gaps we had a decade ago, when we could see so many people were being affected by their technology, is they would go to their doctors with all their symptoms, and the doctors would run the tests they know to run and say, you're fine. You're fine. And they're over there going, I am so not fine. And so then they start paying thousands of dollars out of pocket to specialists. The specialists run the test that they know to run, come up empty, and say you're fine. Or in worst case, they'll say, gee, maybe you should go for a psych consult, telling them it's all in their head, when they know full well something is very wrong in many systems in their body. So we're very grateful that today we have this medical conference. It's called the EMF Medical Conference 2021. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. Now, the Earth has this beautiful electromagnetic field, and there's a scientist named Schumann who figured out that the Earth pulses this beautiful healing energy to every living thing on the planet 7.83 times per second. Or that's a hertz. 7.83 hertz is the unit of measurement. And that's what we're all meant to be synchronized to keep all of our biological systems humming along properly. Well, when we got so fancy with digital technology, we blew right past the hertz, and now we're up into the megahertz and the gigahertz. Megahertz means 1 million times per second. Anything that's radiating is jackhammering us with this spiked, pulsed, man-made energy. In the gigahertz range, it's 1 billion cycles per second. And that modulation, that spike of all this jackhammering is really doing a number on us and every other bird, bee, and tree out there. So we'll teach you that science too. So we're so grateful that we now have this medical conference. It started in 2021, which you'll recognize was in the pandemic, and we had to pivot and put it in an online platform. And the opportunity to earn 24.5 continuing medical education credits expired in July of 2023. But Elizabeth Kelly, who is the executive director of this conference, she has arranged for all of the videos, all of the live panel discussions that were done during the conference, and all of the Q&A are all available online at no charge. So you can go listen to the world's leading experts on this. You can bring this to your healthcare practitioners, because most of them are completely in the dark, having only heard all of the promotional information from the wireless industry. So we have a depth of resources today that we certainly did not have 10 years ago when I got onto this. So that's my story. So how did my schools become the first in the nation to even have, you know, our little sign hanging in our classrooms with precautionary measures? I think it was when they read the legal fine print that has been buried in our devices all along. So right now, if you have an iPhone, I invite you to take it out, and I'm going to walk you through where that legal fine print is. It's probably one of the most effective ways to help others join you in this conversation, is to show them what I'm about to show you. So go into your settings. And while you're getting that ready, I'll mention that our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have a website called See the Fine Print. So you can go out there and you'll see that, you know, all these wireless devices have had this legal disclaimer. The iPads used to say seizures, blackouts, eye strain. And I know personally of families in neighboring towns where children had their first seizures while using a radiating tablet. So from settings, a little ways down, hit general. From general, go all the way down to the bottom and you'll see legal and regulatory. From legal and regulatory, when you hit that, about 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. That's this radio frequency, microwave radiation, electromagnetic fields that the industry politely calls energy, because it is a man-made form of energy. But when we read that legal fine print, it tells us a couple of really important points. One is they tested this at a distance from the body. So if you're holding it in your hand while the antennas are on, if you're putting it up to your head, if you're tucking it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt pocket, or you're tucking it in the front of your yoga pants or putting it in your back pocket, you are exceeding the Federal Communications Commission's guidelines. They're not even standards, but guidelines for how much radiation you should have. Those guidelines, by the way, were never biologically safety tested. They went off some really old science based only on how much heat would it take to raise the temperature of your skin. And that's what they set our public radiation exposure limits to. So we have limits set way up here, but the science is showing us the harm is happening way down here at hundreds of thousands of times below what the industry is still perpetrating on the public. So the other thing that that legal fine print tells us a little further down is to reduce your exposure, basically don't touch something that's radiating. It's common sense once we know this is the technology, but it says to use a hands-free option like speakerphone and a headset. So I'm going to come out of screen share for just a sec to give you a couple of demonstrations. So for the headsets, again, anything we've broken, there are solutions today. So rather than putting a regular headset into a radiating device with a wire going right up to your brain, we should know that one of the properties of microwave radiation is it amplifies around metal. So if you plug in a regular headset with wires right up to your brain, that signal is going to hop on there and go, woohoo, party right on up to the brain, right? So what you want to look for if you must use a radiating device, first of all, turn off all the antennas that you're not using in that moment. Cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot, there's more, but if you upgraded to a 5G phone, you might find you've got more antennas in there too. So let's just learn to use the one antenna for the shortest amount of time possible and create as much distance as you can. So this is something called a hollow tube or an air tube headset, right? Notice there's just rubber tips that go up to your brain. There's no metal there. These little ferrite beads break the radiation coming up the wire. And, you know, it's a nice long cord, so you could set your thing a few feet away from you. But when you use these, the radiation doesn't come right to your head. So a hollow tube or an air tube headset, there are a number of companies out there that sell them. I saw one that looked really cool. It had a set of magnets right here, so you could kind of hang it around your head. And then I went, no, magnets are metal. Don't put metal up to your head when something is radiating. And those earbuds too, you guys, that's a microwave transmitter on both sides of your brain going right through your brain. There's also a lot of information coming out now that they don't allow the ear to breathe, so bacteria gets caught in them. People are getting ear infections and hearing loss. So just because we can doesn't mean we should. So let's just keep learning together. So when I was trying to get my head around all of this, one of the things that puzzled me is this was invisible. So I went back to Wendy, my engineer friend, and I said, Wendy, how do we know this even exists? And I learned that there are radiation detection meters, kind of like, with ionizing radiation, which is the kind that can break the atom and cause all sorts of havoc. There are also radio frequency detection meters for non-ionizing, non-thermal, low-level, man-made microwave radiation. So we're going to give you a demonstration here. And in the scientific literature, because this is now proven to cause cancers and infertility and other problems, it's not just correlation anymore. We now have causation in the science. It's really important to be able to measure. So there's no safe level of this. But if we can get to 10 or below in our sleeping areas, and the unit of measurement on this meter is a microwatt per square meter, whatever that means. So basically within 3 feet of air, how much radiation? On the middle number, when I turn this meter on, we want to be at 10 or less. And indoors, certainly no more than 100, but especially in our sleeping areas, 10 or less. And right now, in my home, because I finally stopped circling my tail and took charge and just one by one went to every device in my home and figured out how to fix it. And we're going to teach you some of that today too. I'm at 3.6. We want to be under 10. So notice that it's green on the meter here. I'm going to now take my cell phone out of airplane mode. I never turn my cell phone on except for emergencies. I forward cell phone calls to my landline. And honestly, most people know I don't use a cell phone, so get me on my landline or my computer because I do that. So I'm coming out of airplane mode right now, which activated all those antennas. So the cellular and data, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the locator, the hotspot. And notice how I'm now up in the flashing red area, and I haven't even done anything. All I've done is come out of airplane. Ooh, okay. I'm going to go back into airplane mode because this thing just went nuts. Okay, and you'll hear this dissipate as the radiation thins out through the air and moves along. So we were at what, 3 a moment ago? We went from 3 microwatts per square meter to 3,180,000. 3 million. And we want to be at 10, not 10,000. We want to be at 10 or less. So this is what the industry has talked us into. So I'm going to go back into my screen share, and we're going to share a lot of really good information with you and hopefully leave you feeling empowered to maybe take one baby step today, because it's overwhelming and we fully acknowledge that and we're very sorry. But it is what it is. So we might as well just get on with it and figure out what we can do. So at the community, once I figured it out and fixed my house, at the community level, I thought, well, everybody should be able to know this. And so I approached my town. We have a little grant fund here for the community. And I said, hey, let's get one of these radiation detection meters for our public library and one for the schools. We can measure, we can understand what our exposures are, and then we can address it. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, I submitted my application for $400 or $800 to get 2 of these meters. And the first time around, they said, gee, we don't really know what this is. Come back next time. So I resubmitted 6 months later. And by then they're going, well, maybe instead of coming to the select board, which is like our city council, maybe you'd ought to be talking to the Board of Health. And I had already met with our health agent, and he was around back in the 1990s when the telecommunications industry got into the pockets of our federal legislators, wrote the 1996 Telecommunications Act And so my health agent was saying, you know, way back then when we were wined and dined, literally, they took our municipal agents out to fancy hotels and wined them and dined them. And if people raised their hands and said, well, if we allow you to bring cell towers into our town, what happens if anybody gets sick or if, you know, it starts impacting the environment? And these lovely people from telecom said, well, gee, so sorry, but you know, this 1996 Telecom Act says there is no legal recourse. You can't sue us for environmental concerns. So that's how they did it. They got it into the law to favor corporate profit over public health and safety. So I knew that our Board of Health didn't know anything. And then around that time, my bill came up for public hearing. And so as I presented the science to the Joint Committee on Public Health, and I showed them Ashland's little sign, and I was holding up my meter to show the radiation in the chamber at the State House, looking into the eyes of the Joint Committee on Public Health, I could tell that not one single member had any idea that wireless radiation is a major factor in why so many people are not well today or are disappearing pollinators. So I realized that I need to get up to the State House and start having conversations one-on-one with every office that had somebody on these committees. And by then we had several different bills in Massachusetts. So I spent a lot of time going up to our State House and meeting one by one with our legislative staff. And I would always start the conversation with, hey, can you share with me what you might know about the biological effects of today's wireless technology? And with the exception of one gentleman out of law school, every single one of them said, well, until you brought it to my attention, I didn't even know we should be having this conversation. So I would spend a good hour talking and teaching. The one gentleman who said, I know a little bit. Why don't you tell me what you came here to tell me? After I met with him for 40 minutes, he shared with me that it was his father, who was the physicist, who brought the team into Chernobyl after it blew. So he grew up knowing that man-made radiation has a lot of underbelly, dark underbelly to it. So, but that's how in the dark many of our public servants are. So having gone and had all these conversations at the State House, I thought, you know what, I better double back in my own town. So I asked for a one-on-one meeting with every member of our select board. And I met one in the new, you know, wine cellar that had just opened in our town. I met another one at a restaurant by his office. I met another one in his home, and he invited a second select board member there. And I did the walkthrough and I showed him the radiation. And another one came to my home. We had raised our daughters together. And then I resubmitted my application. And this was still so unknown through mainstream channels that instead of giving me 2 meters, funding for 2 meters, they said, well, we'll give you funding for 1 for the library under the condition that the library trustees agree to take it into circulation. So I then had to go present to the library trustees. And one older gentleman sat there with his arms folded, and you could see he just had hogwash written all across his forehead. Another one was so eager to get that meter and take it home and see what it was going to do. And then a third member said, regardless of how we feel personally, as a conduit of information in the community, I think we should take a vote on this. And they voted 4-1 to bring this meter into circulation. And the reason I even got an idea for that is when the energy industry was trying to get us to move away from the incandescent light bulbs to these swirly CFLs and LEDs, both of which throw off some strong energies that can be disruptive to our biology. They use an on-off technology, and that can be really hard on our bodies. So it took me 3 tries, but we became the first in the United States to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan in a public library. And back in 2016, we got the acoustimeter. This Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter is the one that was recommended at the EMF medical conference. And I know a doctor here in Massachusetts who bought one. She loans it to her patients for $10, you know, patients who are showing symptoms of microwave sickness, loans it to them for $10. So they all share cost and they'll take it seriously if they have to put a little skin in the game. Says, go home, you've got 2 hours. Go do your scavenger hunt at home, write down what your numbers are on that maximum readout, and then come back and I will teach you how to remediate so that we can then address all the other things that you came to see me about, because if we don't get you out of a radiation environment, the stuff that I normally do is not going to hold. So we became the first in the nation, and now I'm just delighted because I'm hearing from people all over who love this pilot program. And now that we are this far into technology, people don't only read through a hardbound book that they would have gotten from the library, because a lot of people don't even come to the library anymore because they can get it on their e-readers. So libraries are reinventing themselves. And now most libraries have a library of things. My daughter is still on a wait list in her library to borrow a power washer. So there's all sorts of things getting loaned out through our libraries today. So it's not a very big ask to say, hey, can we get some funding and put it toward a radio frequency detection meter? I do recommend, if you do that, that you go into the $400 range. There are some that you can get for $100 to $200, but you get what you pay for. These are both really highly calibrated, good consumer level meters. So if you can do that, great. If you can't, the Environmental Health Trust has a small fund where they can help libraries to get the funding for this. So it can't come from the citizen. The library themselves, the director would need to contact the Environmental Health Trust. So that's something you could do once you get your head around this. That's a great contribution you could make to your own community. And one of the last bastions of independent reporting that's left in our country is our local cable stations, because they're not censored by industry, which owns mainstream media. And therefore we don't get information coming through our regular network channels or our print channels. Most of that is funded by industry, including the wireless industry. So I am so grateful that my local cable station has done a lot of public service announcements with me. Others have had me in for interviews on their programs. And this 23-minute public service announcement is a walkthrough of my home to show what common radiation exposures are today, coming from all different devices, you know, from your microwave oven to your cordless phone, to your personal devices, to your printer, you know, all of it. And then we, of course, always offer solutions you can consider to reduce your exposure. I had been brought in by Patricia Burke, who's another hardworking advocate here in Massachusetts, to go on a couple of programs out in Worcester, Massachusetts, where National Grid rolled out their smart meter grid pilot program. And we'll talk more about smart meters in a minute. But last year, the executive director of that station reached out to me and said, hey, Cece, we want to offer you your own show. We would really love to give you the opportunity to do education on this regularly. So twice a month, I'm invited into the studios and I bring guests with me. Jenny is going to be my guest for the next episode in a couple of weeks. And so we've got about 30 episodes out there right now, and they're all 28, 29 minutes. So easy and quick to watch, but you'll get to hear from scientists, you'll get to hear from doctors and legislators, and you'll get to hear from people who have been injured and really listen to their stories in case you recognize in you or others in your life who might be suffering already and just can't seem to find the right diagnosis. So don't be shy about talking to your local cable stations too. With technology today, I would be honored to do a Zoom program with you too. So let me know and we could do something tailored for your community. So all these resources are there and we want to help you. Okay, so again, please don't take our word on any of this. We want you guys to know this. And so we're teeing up the science to make it quick and easy for you to get in there. So let's talk first about the long-term effects. For years, the industry would spin it that there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. We should have done something that's called the precautionary principle. In science, that means if there's enough evidence to suggest there's a danger to public health or the environment, we're supposed to stop, study it. If it's proven safe, then go back and resume using it. We never did that, in this country especially. So 20 years ago or more, there was enough evidence to infer that this technology is not safe. And so the US National Toxicology Program, which is arguably the gold standard for toxics research in the world, or had been, they were commissioned by the Food and Drug Administration to see if cell phones were safe. And it took them 20 years. Meanwhile, industry shoved all this technology in. It took them 20 years, but there was an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health back in 2018. And they concluded clear evidence of cancerous tumors from cell phones and DNA damage and a number of other findings. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. And that was supposed to trigger public policy, but it didn't. And the industry will get a hold of these good studies and spin it and say, oh, that's just one study. You need more than one study to prove anything. Well, right on the heels of us completing our $30 million study showing cancer and DNA damage, in Italy, the Ramazzini Institute was doing another multi-million-dollar study on cell tower base stations. Guess what? They found the same thing that we did, these cancers, DNA damage, and more. So now we've got the device level and the infrastructure level, all saying this is cancerous and then some. So we don't need more science. We need public policy to protect us. And the only way that happens is when the citizens get informed and will not abide by it any longer. And we'll teach you what to do on that. So DNA damage was also well documented, and DNA, as we know, is the roadmap to grow a proper anything from an infant to a plant, to a pollinator, to a tree, to any biome in our world. It was the infertility studies that actually got me on my feet when I started reading the science, and I saw that they had taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable or programmed cell death or apoptosis. It was killing the sperm in 4 hours of exposure to the radiation from a laptop. And I went, oh my goodness. I had just sent my oldest daughter off to college with her MacBook, which of course she was using on her lap on top of her reproductive organs. My youngest daughter had just gone into high school, and we thought we'd give her a leg up, and we bought her a laptop for Christmas. And she too was using it right on top of her reproductive organs. And now we have study upon study that link it to higher miscarriage rates for women, and, so both male and female reproduction. And we wonder why. As a nation, all of our highly technological countries are down 50% or more on our sperm count, right at the brink of where we can no longer reproduce ourselves. So this is extraordinarily serious. And that's not to say that other pollutant factors aren't at play, but we know scientifically what this is contributing. So neurotoxicity. Our brain has a membrane around it called the blood-brain barrier. And that is to protect the brain from getting contaminated when the blood is escorting toxins out of the body through the bloodstream. So we've got this wonderful blood-brain barrier to keep the brain nice and sanitary in there. What we know through the work of Dr. Pal Patcher and other scientists is that when you pulsate the brain with microwave radiation, it opens up that blood-brain barrier. And now toxins can get in where they ought not to be or have never been before in humankind. So Dr. Hugh Taylor is the head of the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical School, and he has done some of the rodent studies where they expose the mice to cell phone radiation. And when these little mice mummies gave birth, these little pups came out, and within no time, they were like bouncing off the walls of the cage with behavior that much resembles attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in a human child. Dr. Martha Herbert has retired now, but she was a Harvard pediatric neurologist, and she founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital. And she sees huge connections between what we know happens scientifically when we expose the brain to microwave radiation and what she's been seeing in the families in her care with autism. And then Alzheimer's used to hit like in our 70s, 80s, 90s. Now we are seeing early onset Alzheimer's. It's hitting people in their 60s, their 50s, their 40s, their 30s, and even some cases in their 20s. So we cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect that we are going to have normal behavior. And because mainstream media blocks this information from getting to the public, we're so very grateful when well-known groups like the Environmental Working Group come into the fold on this and are able to secure funding to appoint resources to work on this. So as a mom, I first learned about the Environmental Working Group because every year they put out a list called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. These apply to pesticide applications on how our food is grown. So with the Clean 15, you should probably be able to eat those or the edible part of the fruit or vegetable without getting too many contaminants. But the Dirty Dozen, those are the ones that you really want to try and get as organically grown as you can. So I was always very grateful for their work. And now they have a PhD who works on the radio frequency radiation area. So they have come out with some really nice fact sheets that are fairly mainstream. So you got to know your audience. If you want to open this conversation with somebody, maybe they need to see the hard science first, or maybe they already know the Environmental Working Group and they'll go, wow, look at all these scientific references they've got here. So whatever tools you can pull out of these slides, know they're there to help you. And we must know that children in their developing bodies are especially sensitive to this radiation. With great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues, they've done the modeling of how far into our brains this microwave radiation penetrates when you put a cell phone up to the head. These head models are turned sideways, and the little yellow part is the ear. When you put a cell phone up to your brain, it's penetrating into about a third of your brain with microwave radiation. On a 10-year-old child, it's about 3/4 of the brain, and on a 5-year-old child, it's radiating almost the entire brain. So we know that children's skulls are not fully formed, they're thinner, and they have a higher water content in their brain that radiates more than in yours and mine, and it's no good for you and I. So we cannot let this keep happening. We have to learn it for ourselves and then bring in the resources to start doing something about it. I want to go through the short-term effects because this is kind of where it hits home for a lot of people. They may recognize these symptoms, and we should know that the Americans with Disabilities Act, with great thanks to Elizabeth Kelly and others, they have long since recognized electromagnetic sensitivities. In fact, they have through the Jobs Area Network under the ADA, they have fact sheets in there to say, you know, if somebody's experiencing these environmental illnesses, here's what you can do for electromagnetic sensitivity. So it's not like people haven't known, but our government is so contaminated by industry that they have not taken action to protect you and I. So we do what we do and try and help somebody every day. The good news is once people learn and muster up the courage to go against the tide and start taking baby steps, maybe by just shutting things off at night, you can still use your cell phone in airplane mode. On the iPhones, make sure that in addition to airplane mode, you also look at your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth settings, because those antennas tend to stay on. If it just says not connected, remember, it's a two-way communication channel. So it means it's still pulsing the radiation going, here I am, here I am. It's just not connected. You just need to tap that and turn it off on the Bluetooth, off on the Wi-Fi, and anything else. Just go down and see what else might still be up. But once we turn everything off, and you can use your cell phone in airplane mode as a clock, as an alarm, you can use your camera, you can use any entertainment you've downloaded in airplane mode once it's downloaded. So let's just get into the habit of using it, transmitting only when we need it. Insomnia is huge. And again, for years, the industry spun it that, hey, the science is unsettled, so let's keep doing what we're doing. There's no mechanism of harm identified. Well, now we know infertility. Now we know cancers. Now we know DNA damage and how that's happening. With the insomnia, what the science teaches us is that we are light beings, meaning that our whole system, every one of our organs, operates off of this 24-hour circadian rhythm. Some of our organs do their reset during the light hours. Some of our organs do their reset during the darkness. Well, in the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland in the brain is meant to release melatonin. Melatonin goes in and helps to regulate our sleep cycle, and it helps to escort those toxins out of the body through the bloodstream. What our brain cannot do is differentiate between light forms. So it's waiting for darkness to release melatonin. But if we leave this pulsation of man-made light energy on, our brain's going, do, 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 when's it going to get dark? I got to get the melatonin going. And until it has darkness, oftentimes it doesn't release the melatonin. And when we're not getting proper sleep, we know that that comes to a whole cascade of illnesses. So we now know the mechanism of harm on why a lot of people don't sleep. And I'll tell you what, sleeping is the thing that children and teens always did best. And now we have so many sleep-deprived kids. They're sleeping with these devices in their bedroom, under their pillows. So let's stop that today if we can. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds even, fatigue where you just can't get out of your own way, pain from unidentified sources. Now we know another mechanism of harm. It's something called the rouleau effect. And in my little brain, back before I cleaned out my own diet, I used to like those candies, Rolos, that are stacked up like a stack of chocolate caramels. Well, when we're not radiating ourselves, our red blood cells are meant to be free-floating individually to bring oxygen to all of our wonderful systems and organs. And what we see under a microscope, Dr. Magda Havas has done some good work on this, is that these radiated red blood cells, instead of being nicely shaped, start looking like bottle caps. And then they start magnetizing. It's an electromagnetic field, and they start clumping together into a chain that then can't get to where it needs to go to bring the oxygen to keep us functioning properly. So it's causing, what your doctors will recognize as oxidative stress or reactive oxygen species, ROS. So we now better understand what's happening. Once we know better, we can do better. So that's the rouleau effect. And then, who knew, but we've got little antennas in the surface of our skin that help us to regulate temperature, right? And help us to navigate through our world safely. What happens when we overpower our skin with this constant pulsation of microwave radiation? Some people talk about the heating, the hot ear they get when they've had their cell phone to their ear. Others talk about flushing or rashes or tingling or nerve damage where they store their devices on their body. And then our big, beautiful organs, our hearts, our brains, our lungs, all operate off of electrical signaling. You know, they're whispering to each other all the time to keep everything functioning in between your cells. When we overpower ourselves with man-made energy, we find that we get tachycardia, we get blood pressures going wacky, you know, so we can't, you know, palpitations, arrhythmias, and so forth, difficulty breathing, chest pains. So we just can't keep doing this to ourselves and expect we're going to be fine. And then the whole cognitive impairment, anger and behavior issues, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, we are contaminating the brain and damaging the central nervous system. One of the messages that came through loud and clear at the EMF medical conference from these doctors who are working with patients all the time is that if we don't stop this, we can expect to see many more of these outbursts in society like we've been seeing with mass shootings on the increase. I know when we allowed our children to go back to school in Massachusetts, 3 different school districts in Boston were on the news because the children would lose their mind, and they were literally beating their classmates with the very tablet that was issued to them to access their education. So we can't keep doing this, and we need to get the Wi-Fi out of our schools, and we'll give you some resources for that too. So you may know that we were already at epidemic levels of anxiety and depression before the pandemic. And how long have we been frying our kids and ourselves? So sadly, it's not just you and I. At this link, you'll see more on the planetary impact, but again, great resources to show that the science is there and we need to start stepping up. Maybe it's the sustainability committee in your town. Maybe you have a conservation committee in your town that would be interested in these facts. Our friends at the Environmental Health Trust just recently launched a new website dedicated to this: wildlife, wireless, and the environment. So again, everything is there. And here's what it's doing. So our poor pollinators, it's bad enough that they're up against the neonicotinoids and other chemical industry pollutants out there. But they too are very disrupted by these man-made signals. So for example, the birds have magnetite, you know, in their beaks or wherever that allows them to stay synchronized to the Earth's electromagnetic field, and that's how they navigate. And then we put this ginormous layer of electrosmog in their way, and it's no wonder they can't find their way back to the hive, you know, to the hives or the nests. The pollinators too. Look, we are losing species by the dozens now. The American bumblebee is going extinct. How long can we allow this to happen? If we don't stop it soon, it honestly, it can't be that much longer. And then energy consumption, wow. So there was a Greenpeace analyst as far back as 2012 who did the analysis on energy and said, if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And look at what we've done in the 12 years since then with everything we've allowed in. So this is a bad one. And then mineral extractions. Oh, you guys don't even want to know the horrors that go on down in the Congo and elsewhere to mine for the minerals that go into our devices, like dozens of them in each device. If we truly understood that, we would never just go buy the new shiny object that the industry is pushing us into. We would use everything to its full and useful life, and then be sure to recycle it at the end of the life cycle, if we even decide we need this technology. Data warehouses, networks, personal devices for streaming, for sending and receiving, all that we do, all this charging and recharging of our mobile devices is all consuming great amounts of energy, especially streaming. So download stuff to your device go into airplane mode, and then access the material that you've downloaded. And all those apps we got talked into, most people don't even use them, but they're using energy in the background too to keep doing their updates. So once we know better, we can do better. But why don't we know? So that was my big missing puzzle pieces. I'm reading all the science and seeing the fallout. I'm like, surely somebody's got to have our backs on this. And then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this report here called Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And notice the graphic they put on their cover of this free online 59-page report. It's a revolving door, and that's what many of our federal agencies have become today. Now, granted, there still are some good people in our federal agencies. However, much of the decision-making is being done by industry, not to protect you and I. So I was very grateful. That was my missing puzzle piece. And I was like, holy smokes, there is no cavalry coming. And it's taken me this long to fully get it through my head that you and I, we are the ones who have to exercise our civic duty, learn about this, bring in the experts, educate our local boards and our schools, and get this taken care of, and then push it up from the local to the state to the federal. And then ProPublica came out with a good article last year about the corruption. FDA. So remember, it was the Food and Drug Administration that commissioned that $30 million study with the National Toxicology Program that proved cancers and DNA damage. Well, that should have triggered public policy to protect you and I, and it did not. Instead, this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, you know, he's not the people who started this study 20 years ago. They're all long gone. He's now in charge of radiation at the FDA, and he went over to the FCC and said, we don't really believe that National Toxicology Program study that found clear evidence of cancer. Yeah, we don't believe that. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. So one might ask, what possessed Dr. Shuren to do that? And again, you don't have to look very far to discover that he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents big Wi-Fi, along with a lot of the other big environmental polluters. So there are conflicts of interest all the way up to the World Health Organization. So if you were to search the World Health Organization on EMFs or radio frequency, the first things that are going to come up is old news, old stuff that they posted like back in 2016, and they've got it pegged. So that's what comes up. And it basically says, oh, it's inconclusive. Let's keep doing what we're doing. You wouldn't even know to look any further. You wouldn't even know that they have reopened their investigation because of that National Toxicology Program study, because of the Ramazzini Institute cell tower study, and a bunch of other studies that are now into the public record. And they do have an open investigation now. And they are looking to see the impact on cancers, on children, on infertility, on the environment, on people who have electromagnetic sensitivities or illnesses. It's not even that they're sensitive. Our cells are not compatible with this technology. So they have reopened their investigation, but unfortunately, there's two groups at the World Health Organization that report out and work on this field. One of them is built by industry, and it's stacked with industry, and they have no expertise in that group. And then there's the other group of actually qualified scientists and others. And it looks like this new task with the WHO has been given to the industry group again. So again, as heartbreaking as this is, there is no cavalry coming. We have to learn about it if we want to see any change, and we have to take action. So that's all the bad news, you guys. So let's start focusing on solutions. What does safe technology look like? So it's not rocket science to fix, fortunately. Pretty much everybody's got a router in their home right now. Go poke around on that, and you will find on the bottom or the back somewhere Ethernet ports. And then you just get a big long Ethernet cable and run it to wherever you use your technology. Most people today have more than one device, and you can look for something called an Ethernet switch. You can think of it as an extension cord for electronics, but it's just a little box. You plug from the router, because there's a big cable coming to your house that brings the internet to you from the street. So that's what your router's plugged into. You pick up that signal through this cable, run it through this little switch box, and then for however many devices you have, just get an individual cable and an adapter. Who knew? For like 30 bucks, you can buy a little Ethernet adapter for the iPhone. And, just go do your homework before you buy anything and make sure you've got the right, adapter that'll fit the plugs on yours. But this one is the Lightning to RJ45 Ethernet adapter, and it fits the iPhone. So then you just, you're plugged in with a cable and you plug it into your device. So that's the first step, is to just hardwire, and you can pretty much hardwire most of our wireless technology. If I was lucky, I still had a box of Ethernet cables down in my basement. So I just started pulling them back out. I found my old trimline phone that we used to have hanging in our kitchen, and I put it back in our kitchen. I got rid of all those decked cordless phones that were floating around my house, because those sit there radiating like a cell tower or a router or a phone or a laptop. They're all pulsating 24/7 unless you take control of the antennas. So I got rid of those, and I put my old trim line back in my kitchen with a big long cord on it so I can cook and clean and talk if I need to. But right in your settings, you can forward your cell phone calls to your landline. I know a lot of people got talked out of their landline, but we should never have let industry start that conversation. If we have a power outage for any length of time and your cell phone's not charged, you cannot even call for emergency services. And that's presuming that the cell towers above ground didn't get knocked out with whatever knocked out your electricity. Our telephones originally went through copper wiring that went right to the home, and it had nothing to do with electricity. So when we had a blizzard here one year, power was gone for 36 hours, but we still had the ability to call people, and especially to call for emergency services. So California right now, right this week, in fact, is trying to save their landlines, because wireless is not advanced technology anymore. We've got to start using wires again. So the first step is to hardwire all your stuff. The second step is to go into the settings from your router to your phone, to your laptop, to your tablets, everything, and manually turn off all those antennas. And because the industry is pushing 5G and the Internet of Things, they are forecasting that every home will have 200 wireless devices connected to the internet. If that's 200 devices, multiply that by the number of antennas in each one of those devices. So this is not sustainable. So we always have to measure, because if you don't measure, you'd never know if you got all those antennas. And I'll give you an example. When my daughter was in college, she taught swim lessons on break out of the pool in our backyard. And I've hardwired our house, and she came home and she wanted to print out her swim schedule from her laptop. And she said, "Mom, can I just turn on the Wi-Fi real quick?" I said, "Yeah, make sure you turn it off when you're done." And so she did. And the next Monday morning, I'm sitting here in my office. I ate a nice, clean, organic breakfast. I slept pretty well on the other end of the house. And I'm sitting here, and it just felt like the earth was sucking me down. And I've never felt good under fluorescent lighting. So my body all along has said some of these man-made energies are not compatible with your own bio makeup here. So I'm like, why am I feeling like this? So I pulled out my meter, and it started going off. And so I did the scan, and it was my printer. And there's a little glow plate on the front with the Wi-Fi logo, and it wasn't glowing. So I thought the Wi-Fi was off, but why am I getting all this radiation? So I just looked up the manual online, and it turns out that printer had 3 wireless antennas in it. And so I just had to go into settings and turn them off. So then we bought a new TV, and I thought I had it set up where we could plug it in through an Ethernet port in the back. But on a lark, I turned on my meter the other day, and the darn thing was radiating at like 40,000 microwatts, and we want to be at 10 or less. So I picked up that giant television and I hauled it into my car, and I took it to the tech guy in my town, and I said, hey, I couldn't find it in the settings. I called the manufacturer. There was no way for me to turn off that antenna. So I said, can I pay you to open that puppy up and take that antenna out? And he did. It cost me like 80 bucks of his time. But here's what it was. This is what the wireless antenna is. It just plugs in to like the motherboard in your devices. And it's just a little circuit board. Get that thing out of there, and then you can enjoy your technology for safer uses. So that's what you and I can control. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes going over some areas that we may not have direct control over, but that are being imposed on us without our informed consent. The first is the utility smart meters. So when I was a little kid, I'm the youngest of 10 kids. So when you're outside playing hide and seek, it can take a pretty long time to get found. So I'd be hiding out in the bushes, right? And I would see the meter mounted on the house for gas or water or electric or whatever. And I would just sit there and keep myself occupied watching those little dials go around and around and around and watch the numbers go. Well, that was a good old-fashioned analog mechanical meter. There was nothing pulsating in there. There was nothing electronic or electrical that could corrupt the signals on your house wiring. It was just a good old mechanical device that lasted for 40 or 50 years. Well, then technology advances, and the industry came into our towns and said, hey, we know you have to pay a public works employee to go out there and get everybody's reading by walking the neighborhood once a month. And that's how you get your billing. So we have a new system for you with these digital meters. We can bring our stuff into your town, get rid of those old-fashioned analog meters, give you new technology that will allow the DPW worker to come into a neighborhood and just drive by with his scanner and pick up all those readings really, really, really fast. And it's going to save your town some money. Doesn't that sound great, Kay? Sign right here. So a lot of our towns started with these digital meters. Well, there's a lot of problems with those. And let's show you what those are. If you have a digital meter, it has a Federal Communications or an FCC ID number somewhere on it. That's your tip that it's radiating. And remember how we talked about one of the properties of this radiation is it amplifies around, metal. So that radiation can literally hop onto the pipes in your home and travel all over, making your house one big giant radiating antenna. And then there are far too many reports of fires and explosions, improper grounding. If you get a power surge and your system can't handle it, it can cause an electrical fire in the walls. And what I've learned from Susan Foster, who's an honorary firefighter, she's been a medical writer on this for a long time, is that when you have an electrical fire, the fire department can't just show up with their hose and put it out. If you put water on an electrical fire, it's going to arc and come back, and it's going to kill the firefighter. So once they get there and figure out that it's an electrical fire, now it's been burning for a while, and now they then have to get in touch with the electric company, and they have to go through their protocol to get all of that shut down before the fire department can do their work. This could take up to an hour, and heaven forbid it's a windy day and it's now caught your whole neighborhood on fire. A lot of the big wildfires out in California and elsewhere were started by telecom equipment, like faulty wiring on a cell tower and stuff. So it's not all what the industry has cracked it up to be. And then for those who are concerned about data harvesting and privacy issues, Anybody with $100 app out at the curb can be hacking in and getting your wireless signals, which is your data. And they can see patterns. They can say, gee, you leave your house at 8 o'clock. Well, 9 o'clock, we're going to back up our truck and take all your toys. Or they're taking your data and selling it to third-party vendors. And the utility companies themselves have that capability as well. So lots of reasons why we got sold a raw deal on these smart meter systems. And at the medical conference, they were saying that when these close range exposures like smart meters get installed, they see an increase in microwave sickness coming through the doors of our medical practitioners who understand this. This is a big environmental justice issue. These corporate polluters come into environmental justice communities where there is low income, high racial minority percentages, people working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep the roof over their head and the food on the table. They have no time to tune into what's going on here. There may be language barriers. But National Grid, for example, came into Worcester, Massachusetts, and rolled out their smart grid program. So first we started with the drive-by readings. Those are now being replaced in many communities. They get rid of the drive-bys and they just send the signal from one house to the next house, pick up that data, to the next house, pick up that data, and so on down the line to a collector station. So every house further down the line is getting more data, more microwave coming at them wirelessly. And then they send it to a transmitting station here, a collection station, that then sends it off to presumably the utility company, but they can also be selling it off to our governments, to third-party vendors who want to know what you do so they can start targeting you for product. So, and again, here's the hackers along the way who can break in. There's terrorists who could shut us down. It's just industry pushing things that have not been well thought out for public safety and health. It's hard to have these conversations, especially with people who work in the industry, because all they've been told is you have to have heat from a device before you can have harm. And now we know there are very bad effects at the non-thermal level. So I'm grateful to Jeremy Johnson, who is a Silicon Valley engineer. He and his wife, who's a medical doctor, lived in a condo, and both of them got suddenly really sick, all these, constellations of symptoms. And nothing in her medical background could help them crack the code. What's going on here? Well, it turns out it all started when a bank of smart meters went in on their condo. So Jeremy Johnson did a TED Talk about this, and TED Talks are about 15 minutes. So again, something very digestible. And he now does consulting for people all over the world. So you could book a consultation with him if you have specific questions on how to remediate or find a home that's low EMF. Dr. Alexia McKnight, ironically, is a radiologist. She's a veterinarian radiologist. So she works with ionizing radiation all the time. And she knows how dangerous it is. That's why we would never leave ourselves out in the sun in that ionizing radiation for 24/7, or our children. We use protective lead aprons when we get an X-ray because we know it's damaging. Well, she had no idea about non-ionizing radiation damage until a smart meter went on her home. And you can listen to her TED Talk here. And it was just horrifying that her brain was getting so damaged that she was out in traffic with her daughter in the car one day and could not remember if that green light meant stop or go. So we really need to understand what this technology is doing as the industry is forcing this into our towns. So smart meters are one area we may or may not have control over. Some towns will allow you an opt-out. The state of Vermont has a no-fee opt-out, and we have bills in Massachusetts and elsewhere, New York, Connecticut. Others are also trying to get that no-fee opt-out, but the industry gets in there and pulls their shenanigans, so it's not easy. So cell towers. It is critically important to look at the non-industry funded science, not the funded science by industry, because they will do their studies under conditions that are rigged to show no harm. Well, no harm is never the same thing as safe. So it's important to look at the non-industry funded science. And I mentioned earlier that I'm a tech writer. So when I got in way over my head and couldn't remember how to get back to good resources that I wanted to revisit or share, I just started creating my own very simple repository that I called Understanding EMFs, because I didn't understand what electromagnetic fields were. So I just started creating pages by categories, and you're welcome to go out here. If you go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology on my resources page, it connects you with all the pages in my research repository. So this one on cell towers shows us that the science is telling us out in society, we do epidemiological studies. That was a new word for me to learn, but it's basically the science of what's happening out there. And there is a curve in the statistics that starts coming down around 500 meters. I had to look that up too. That's 1,640 feet. And in that curve, we have higher death rates, higher neurotoxicity and other rates from a cell tower nearby. So it starts coming down at 500 meters or 1,640 feet. It doesn't actually catch up to regular population statistics of those illnesses or deaths till double that. So we should never, ever have allowed close range cell towers and now these 5G small cells. So here's the science. It's very well documented. Oh, I want to go back and say, there's a website in the US called antennasearch.com. You can put in any address and it will give you a return of a 3-mile radius of where these big cell antennas are, because that's what these macro antennas are called. They're called macro cell antennas. They're the big ones that started in industrial parks 300 feet up in the air, far away from us. And then because of their trickery with the law, they said, well, if we can paint it the same color as your building or hide it behind a facade or behind a fake looking tree, then aesthetically it's okay. So we can do this. So you might want to see just how close and how polluted you are where you live and work and play and perhaps worship. This is an example of one neighborhood here in Boston in Hyde Park. All these cell antennas are just everywhere now. This was a little map I did of Boston. I put in the State House office in Boston, their address. And at the time, there was 1,520 cell towers in a 3-mile radius with over 4,500 antennas. And these broadcast for miles, like 20, 30 miles. So the electropollution that we are now suffering under is just astronomical. And, you know, they can make the most money where the most people are. So that's why they keep densifying this. So our cities have become just really, really unhealthy from an air pollution quality standard. Now let's add in the 5G small cells. So 5G just means 5th generation technology. We don't want to confuse it with 5 gigahertz. That's something else. That's the actual pulsation of radiation. 5G means generation. And it doesn't really mean anything at all. There's no real definition. It's just the next phase about every 10 years of what they roll out with their technology. There's no standards or anything defined by it. Every company's doing it differently. So we co-hosted in January with Dr. Deborah Green from Hawaii. And she has a good little video here on what 5G is and what 5G isn't. You might like to see that. But what the industry is doing to spin this up is to say, you're going to get faster download speeds. You know, woohoo, won't it be great? You'll get your movie put on your device like this. Smart cities, super highways and all this. But look and see who's buying up the entertainment industry. It's these same corporations that are promoting all of this wireless toxic technology. So it's a new all this streaming and stuff is a new revenue stream for them. And it's not like 5G is just going to replace all the other stuff that they started with. All the other stuff is still the backbone for 5G. But all that's left, they've pretty much maxed out certain wavelengths, big, long wavelengths can make it through the walls and the ceilings and the floors from the cell towers to get to your devices. They have to keep that right now. And then they're adding these tiny little millimeter waves to spin up all this new fast data download and stuff. But those little tiny millimeter waves get disrupted by anything in their path, rain, snow, trees. So they're adding on to the electropollution that we've already got. And their goal is to put one inside our neighborhoods every 2 to 12 houses so that those signals can make the hop. Literally on poles outside of people's bedroom windows. Oh, and if there's a tree in the way, guess what? They come in and just clear cut the trees too. At a time when we're up against climate change and our towns and our cities are all trying to plant trees to create a tree canopy to try and cool our communities. So it is just so wrong on so many levels. And you might appreciate watching this little 3 or 4 minute video from our friends at the Environmental Health Trust. Senator Richard Blumenthal out of Connecticut, who I think used to be their attorney general, he was at a congressional hearing in DC at the Commerce Committee, and he said to these 2 industry representatives, so please share with us, how much money have you invested to prove this technology safe before bringing it to market? And they both did the hamna, 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 and then they were made to say, as he paraphrases it, so as far as health and safety are concerned, we're flying blind here. Yep. And Computer World and other, trade journals are saying 5G is a bad joke. We're not even really getting much faster speeds than what we already had with toxic 4G. And then it didn't stop anybody, Verizon's boasting that now 100 million have access to 5G because they've done something like this to our cities with all these antennas. And then this is not a popular conversation to have, so be careful with it. It can come back to bite you. There were people going out there saying 5G caused the pandemic, and that became a big point of disinformation, and so it can cause alienation if you talk about the pandemic and 5G in the same breath. But do know that Dr. Rob Brown and Dr. Beverly Rubik did a really important paper. And normally, when you do a scientific paper and you submit it to be published, it goes through something called peer review, where 2 or 3 other experts in that field would look at the study and validate it and make sure it was done with scientific integrity, et cetera. And for this paper to get published, that peer review involved 15 or 16 experts to make sure it was rock solid before it got published. And what their paper teaches us is that in the areas where there were high levels of man-made radio frequency radiation from wireless, there were statistically significantly more deaths and cases of COVID-19. And scientifically, it makes sense because our biological cells only have so much energy. That energy is pretty well calibrated to get us through our everyday energy needs and then do the cell repair and regeneration while we sleep at night. When we have constant exposures of microwaves, our bodies get overpowered and they can't do it all. So they have to start taking energy from here or conserving it here to do this, to clean this up. And before you know it, we start getting sick, and then you throw a virus on top of it. And what's our body got left to fight with? So if you've already got a pre-existing anything, you're already down a court, and we haven't even started with the pandemic yet. So that's an important paper. Dr. Magda Havas, who is the co-chair of the EMF Medical Conference, she's now retired from Trent University up in Canada, where she, retired with emeritus status, which means retiring basically with honors. And she taught EMFs at Trent for 25 years, I think. She recognizes that most of our governments have dropped the ball on this, and nobody is out there measuring the cumulative effect of all of this electro pollution, because it's not just one device, it's all of it that creates a cumulative effect in our bodies. So we have to learn to get out from under this. So she has started her global EMF monitoring project, which she nicknamed her BRAG project, and she uses the BRAG acronym. G stands for green. Back in Salzburg many years ago, scientists at that point got together and said, look, if we could at least get our outdoor exposures to 1,000 microwatts or less, presuming you have a clean place at home to clean up from, that might be doable. So 1,000 or less is where we should be. We really shouldn't have it at all, but if we could get there, it would be a good thing. Amber is 1,000 to 10,000 microwatts. Red is 10,000 to 100,000, and blackout, big trouble, is more than 100,000. So you can go out to globalemf.net, and she invites anybody who invests in one of the Safe Living Technologies Safe and Sound Pro 2 meters to partner with her as a citizen scientist. And she has protocols to go out and measure in real time, what are these exposures? So you take a friend with you, one can do the measures, the other can be on your clipboard writing out her form, and then you enter it into her database. So if you want to be a citizen scientist, please reach out to globalemf.net. And if you haven't purchased that meter and you want to, mention that to them, because our friend Rob Metzinger, who is the president of Safe Living Technologies, he is offering a discount to citizen scientists who agree to do the study with Dr. Havis, because we can help get it done. So please consider that if you're interested. So what do common exposures look like today? Again, we want to be at 1,000 or less outdoors. We did a lot of work in New Hampshire and, took various levels, but this is happening all over. It's increasing. And now we know some of these areas have since gotten 5G small cells, so we know it's going to be higher. Here in Boston, see this pretty lamppost? Well, guess what? It's actually a fancy looking 5G small cell. And when we measured, we were over 500,000 in this heavily trafficked tourist area, which is where all of our really incredible Italian restaurants and bakeries are. But right above the stores are residential homes with these cell towers right in front. So this is what our world is doing if we don't do something to use our voice. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that when we finally make meaningful change in our society, it comes through 3 channels. One, the public learns about it and gets involved, and that's what we're hoping to inspire today. It goes through the courts, and then public policy ultimately catches up. So I will leave you with my slides where you can do the deeper dive, but I'll spend the next couple minutes just showing you what's here in each one of these areas. Because although we don't hear about it in mainstream media, there is a ton of amazing work being done right now that you can jump into easily, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can teach you what you need to know. So remember when we talked about Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, who was in charge of that $30 million cancer study, went over to the FCC and said, yeah, we don't believe it. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, the FCC took that from the FDA and entered it in formally to something called the Federal Register. Once their determination was filed that they didn't have to improve their microwave radiation exposure limits, then the lawsuits began, because there had been a public record open for 6 years into which the scientists, the medical community, the people who had been sick, or the survivors of the people who had already died from it, all put their testimonies in there. 6 years worth of evidence of harm, and they completely blew it off. So the Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and a number of parties across the country sued the FCC for ignoring the public record of harm. At the end of the day, these organizations spent a lot of time and a lot of money getting their court case together, and they presented these three judges, I think it's the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, to these three judges and said, here is 27 volumes, 11,000 pages of evidence of harm that has been ignored. So the judges are looking at this and going, wow, you know, and so they turned to the attorneys for the FCC and said, please share with us, how did you determine those 1996 public radiation exposure levels before we had any of what we have today? How did you determine those are still okay to stick by? And the FCC did one of these. Well, the FDA said it was okay. So of course the judges say, well, where's the FDA's homework? And there is none. Not one of our federal agencies has done the assessment on man-made microwave radiation. Anybody who was working on it back when that Telecom Act was passed in 1996, the EPA, the CDC, all their programs were defunded. So we have a huge regulatory gap. There's nobody up there fixing it anytime soon. Many, many, many other lawsuits happening all over the country and even all over the world. A couple that I would like to mention here, because this is active right now. Verizon went in on top of a neighborhood in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, out in what we call the Berkshires. It's a very bucolic, beautiful area where people go to live a lovely life. Well, Verizon put a cell tower illegally on top of this neighborhood, and in short order, 17 children and adults got so sick that they had to abandon their homes. And they talked to their town about it. They were going to all their local zoning meetings, board, you know, planning board, health board, city council, mayor, trying to show them what was happening. And they kept getting swept under the rug until finally, after a year and a half, they did order their Board of Health to investigate. The Board of Health spent a year. They completed their investigation and concluded that, yes, these families were made sick. And by the way, the pollinators all disappeared too. Were all made sick because of that cell tower. And Verizon came in, instead of coming to the table and working it out, because another property owner said, hey, I have commercial property. You can just move your cell tower over here. It won't affect any residential areas. Verizon wouldn't do it. They went to the courts and got an injunction against the Board of Health's emergency order. So now there's a civil lawsuit, with great thanks to Children's Health Defense for helping on this, against the town of Pittsfield, against their city council, against their Board of Health, and against the mayor, because they would not give the town would not give their own Board of Health the funding to defend themselves in court. And the Board of Health believes that even though that Telecom Act says there are some limitations about whether you can stop us from putting a cell tower here or there, there's a lot of things every town can do to stop a cell tower, but industry only tells them your hands are tied. So the Board of Health in Pittsfield believes they have determined that once something goes into the community, if it is hazardous to the environment or the inhabitants, then it is their job and their jurisdiction to fix it. And that's what Pittsfield's Board of Health wants to do if they can get this injunction lifted by the court. So we're waiting this spring to see how that will come out. But that could be groundbreaking. We understand the industry, just like big tobacco, has billions set aside because they know the legal risk. It's already documented in their stakeholder papers. So they know, and now it just has to be push comes to shove. So lawsuits happening all over the place. So we talked about the public getting educated. We talk about taking it through the courts, and I'll show you the legal solutions. I mentioned that New Hampshire got the first law in the land passed. In 7 months, we brought experts to New Hampshire and citizens who could attest from their own experiences just how sick this makes people. So lots you can read here, really important questions that had to be asked about that legal fine print. The insurance industry has already walked away because they know this is a leading risk, and the FCC dropping the ball and radiating all of this. So lots of good resources there, presentations you can watch. From that report came 15 recommendations to inform the public, to protect the public, to fix our broken federal regulations, to label everything, to get Wi-Fi out of the schools and our libraries. You know, it's a stellar report. And every time they try to take those recommendations and start getting them passed into new laws, the industry comes in and torpedoes. So we keep trying, but there's no cavalry coming. We cannot wait for public policy to catch up. We need to protect our own communities right now. And there have been bills filed in many of our states. We've got 6 of them here in Massachusetts. Our commission bill is advancing. We're waiting to see what'll happen with the smart meter bill. And these others have been sent to study, but we need to start tracking this. We already have a database at the state level with our Department of Public Health that tracks all illnesses. It's high time electromagnetic illnesses get included, tracked, and reported on. So lots of good templates here if anybody else wants to introduce legislation elsewhere. And then one of the things the industry does is they come into our towns and they make all these incentives like, oh, hey, if you let us put cell towers up right here, you'll get an incentive, a monetary kickback for leasing your property to us. So it all sounds really good. The smart meters sound good until we know the risk side of it. And they come in and say, oh, nobody else cares. We've been doing this all over the place. If somebody says something, those are just the NIMBYs, not in my backyard people. Well, you can come onto this page to see that is simply not true. There are groups all over the country already formed and working on this. And just here in Massachusetts on cell towers, there's a lot of really good things that have been accomplished, but again, not covered in mainstream media, though a lot of the local media may still report on this unless their advertising revenue is hampered and there's a conflict of interest. So we have to just stop believing industry and use our own common sense and look for the actual facts. A lot of towns are taking action too, and you can look at that. Public servants down in Easton, Connecticut, a grandmother figured this out. She went to her town, and on one of their boards was a medical doctor who could look at the science. They put a moratorium on 5G. They said, no, until it's proven safe, we are not going to approve these applications. And then they re-upped their moratorium recently. So Stamford, Connecticut, Representative David Michel of Stamford, he had brought me in to do a lunch and learn with some of his Democratic colleagues, which I was happy to do. I'll teach anybody. I don't care what party they're in. But he brought in another panel of experts for Stamford. And once their town heard what all this is, they looked to their governor and said, look, governor, you've been coming up with a deal with industry and you're rolling this out to your 5 largest cities. We, Stamford, say no, thank you. We do not want 5G small cells at the curb outside of our homes. So it's happening. This was just in November, I think, or this fall. So, but nobody knows Hawaii County. And then this is going on all over the world, and you can go look and see. It'll give you courage because then you know you're not alone. We really have to get wireless out of our schools. I just had a former middle school nurse call me up this week and say, when the wireless system went into our schools, we started seeing all these new kids coming into our office with nosebleeds and headaches, inability to concentrate, skin problems, gut problems, nausea. And she knew about wireless radiation and went to the principal, and the principal didn't think it was a priority to look into this. So we have to take charge. And Louisiana, one of the doctors down there rounded up other doctors to say, look, technology's come in, but where is the balance? It's all just been pushed at us. So they have best practices for digital devices to just start getting kids back to learning how they learn best. Real communication with real people and real children. connecting with the natural environment, movement and touch. That's how a child properly develops. So they didn't take EMFs head on, but they're headed in the right direction to start raising awareness, because they were told basically you'll get blown out of the water if you try to take down EMFs. So this is at least a good first step to bring some common sense balance back. But look at this, the Netherlands, Finland, and other countries are removing technology from the classroom because it's become such a distraction that children are not learning as they used to. The New York Times did a series on what Silicon Valley execs are doing, and they're going so far as to have their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens near their children. And they're sending their kids to school with no technology, not wired, not wireless, no technology, because they know that is not how you develop a proper child. So again, solutions for everything. Our lovely friends, Patty and Doug Wood at Grassroots Environmental Education. They have a whole program online called Tech Safe Schools. Reach out to them. They'll send a packet of information to your school administrators that you can then gather people around you and go start having that conversation with your schools, the legal, the science, and most importantly, how to remediate. It's all there. The Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has worked with other partners and developed K through 12 curriculum on prevention. It already exists. Dr. Alexia McKnight and I, she's the radiologist that got so sick from the smart meter. She and I went in and did 4 sessions during her children's staff school teacher professional development day. So there's a 46-minute video right there for you. And then we've got our little course online. We can train the entire school. And Environmental Health Trust has a ton of resources that you can print out, little flyers, postcards to make it easy. They helped Maryland become the first public health agency to recommend hard wiring in the schools, and they just came out with a fact sheet. And then the U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools does green school certifications, and they, thanks to Dr. Tony Stein, she helped them to develop a module on low EMF best practices. And in our talk today, we've been focusing on the man-made radio frequency radiation. But there's another form of radiation that can be very harmful if the wiring in the building wasn't done properly. It can create dirty electricity that it's invisible, but it pulses out from the walls 6 to 8 feet into our living space. And for many people, that makes them very sick too. So we know how to fix these things once we start addressing them. So lots and lots of really good resources for our schools. And for everybody else. You know, I mentioned that we have that new EMF medical conference that is now at no charge. And the first medical school textbook was just released in recent months from Dr. Panagopoulos out of Greece and colleagues from all over the world who each contributed a chapter. So we can now do the training that's so desperately needed in our medical schools. And Dr. Cindy Russell founded Physicians for Safe Technology. That's an excellent resource to share with your own healthcare providers. And then we have stuff for everybody else too. So you can look through all of these and find things to mirror the audience that you want to speak to about this. Know who you're talking to and give them the resources that will quickly make sense in their world. And then for you and I, if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, please know there's an entire profession called building biologists who are trained to go in and measure for mold or air quality VOCs, formaldehyde, water, all of it. And then there are those who are also certified as electromagnetic radiation specialists. There aren't enough of them out there. So if there's not one in your area, they can often do a consult with you online and send you the equipment for you to measure. And then they'll walk you through the report that they prepare at the end. This is one of our best tools. It's called Generation Zapped. It's an award-winning documentary that in Europe is still available through Amazon Prime, but they've just censored it here in the US. But your local library likely has subscriptions to Canopy or Hoopla, and those have Generation Zapped in many of those collections. So I strongly recommend you watch it And then you get your friends and your neighbors and the parents of the kids that your kids hang out with, invite them over for a potluck supper, have some fun, have some food, and then sit down and watch this movie. And then you will have built a team. And then one voice is too easily dismissed. You'll be swept right under the rug. But once you have a team, then you have leverage. And so long as you don't expect somebody else to just pick it up and take care of it, if you keep showing up and keep bringing the facts and don't let it slip off the agenda, you can move mountains. Bert Wolf on PBS did 2 episodes, and then our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have built an entire toolkit for you to know what to do to start this conversation in your home, in your town, in your community. So use the resources, they're there for you. And kids are big fans of monkey see, monkey do. If you are on your screen all the time, 1, you're ignoring your children. 2, they're going to do whatever you're doing. So it's really important that we set the example for what safe technology looks like. And a lot of people have forgotten what we used to do before we were behind a screen all the time. Take a closer look at this. 50 ways to take a break. Get out in nature, be creative, do artistic things, look in on a neighbor, help somebody, write music, take a rest, do nothing and just sit and think for a while. Go hang out in a hammock, you know, all these things that keep us healthy. So there's another body of science that talks about those electromagnetic fields that come from the earth and how we're supposed to have them to stay healthy. But we walk around on rubber-soled shoes that don't connect with that anymore. We drive on rubber-soled sneakers on our car. We live off the ground. So let's reconnect to the earth. And Dr. Conover has taken this season by season and gives us just lovely ideas to bring community together and also get ourselves out there and get grounded again. So, all right. So for our towns, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has something called the ALARA principle, which means we need to get to as low as reasonably achievable. And with radiation, they say, do that in 3 ways. 1, spend as little amount of time as you can radiating yourself. 2, create as much distance as you can from something that's radiating. And 3, if you can't get away from it, learn how to shield. And we always recommend you engage a professional for that because there's some things that could backfire. So investigate. Our towns need to get on this. They've only heard from industry. They've already got money coming in from industry. So it's a hard conversation. But once they understand the legal risk that they're up against, they may start taking action. So we've got a whole toolkit of things for that as well. And then next steps, we have to admit to ourselves we have a problem. There is no safe level of man-made radiation. Less is definitely better. And let's just keep educating. I'll be doing these free webinars twice a month. I'm right now inviting leaders from other states to come join us, and then they can use these programs to work further in their own communities. So we always try to do 2 a month, and you can always find them at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And then, you know, think about how can you help educate your town? I love educating. You don't have to know everything. I certainly don't know everything. But if what I've pieced together in the last 10 years can help you to get this conversation jump-started, bring me in. I would love to join you. And here's some samples of where we've done these community trainings. But please, let's start protecting the kids. And we know how, and we know how to have that conversation, but it has to be done through local constituents in the district. You can make the arrangements, get it onto an agenda in your town, and then invite me to Zoom in. If you're local, I'd love to come in person because that's much more effective. And then start where you are. What do you do? Who do you know? What organizations might you belong to? Many of them are always looking for public speakers for their quarterly or annual conferences. I'm being brought into medical conferences. So if there's anything I can do to help get this information, at least lay the groundwork and then give them the specific resources that apply to their field, I would be there in a heartbeat for you. Okay, so our towns really need to start up tech safety committees because tech is here to stay and nobody is doing that. Except Burlington, Massachusetts, they pulled together a townwide committee and put in a small cell policy that said, no, you can't just drop and run. And they put some framework around that to make it more difficult to put those near residential areas. So we know what we need to do and we know how to do it. And most of our town attorneys are great people, but they are no match for industry. So you need an expert. Andrew Campanelli used to work for the industry till he figured out their game. And now he represents individuals and towns. And I think for 8,500, he can look at your local zoning bylaw, tell you what your gaps are, rewrite it for you. And then your town has something strong to make it really hard for industry to just come in and dump these cell towers where they don't belong. So for today, think about one thing you might be able to do. Start noticing what is radiating. Start with baby steps. Maybe you want to create that sleep sanctuary and see for a week. Do I feel better if we're not radiating with the router, with our devices, with the Roku or the Chromecast or, the wearables? Create a sleep sanctuary and then make your way to hardwiring with Ethernet cables and adapters. And again, it's not rocket science to fix. Keep every antenna you own off or in airplane mode until the one time that you need it and for only a short amount of time as you can get away with. And then look at these great fact sheets and stuff and checklists that Environmental Health Trust has. So please use what's there. I'll be updating this with the contact information for our friends in Virginia, but you can contact me here and I'll be putting in Jenny's and on the 25th at 6 p.m. we'll be doing this program again with another Virginian, and that is Doris Knick with Virginia Medical Freedom Alliance. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm going to stop the screen share here and we'll spend the next few minutes. If anybody had any questions, Jenny, were there any questions we need to address from the chat?
Just two so far. One is, can somebody copy this and share it on their personal channel, this webinar?
Yes.
Is that okay? Like
yeah,
a Rumble or YouTube?
I will have it up on YouTube and you are more than welcome to share.
Okay. I thought that'd be your answer, but I just wanted to hear from you. And then does Framingham have smart meters?
Yes. And small cells.
And then Jill asked if you could type your website in the chat, which
Sure.
it will also be on the slides too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it will. And hey, where'd my chat go? They put so much more stuff in here.
I know, it's hard to find it. And then Sydney
chat.
has her hand raised too.
Okay. Hi, Sydney.
Hi, this was wonderful. I'm so glad I got to join you. Great to see you, Jenny. It's so interesting how things that we think are going to be awful, that a terrible thing happening in our life or whatever, can lead to something good. And just what happened with me was that in 2010, we had a house robbery. We have gates. We put locks on our gates. And then when they were rolling out the smart meters and they couldn't get into our property. So one day they came and they knocked on the door. We got to get in. I got to install this new meter. I said, oh, no. I said, go away. And they said, well, no, we have to put this in. You're mandated, blah, blah, blah. I said, go away. So they left and then of course we had to pay the opt out. But how many times did they come back to just do that? If we didn't have locks on our gates, if we didn't have a house robbery that created locks on our gates. So this is just a silly little example, but it just means that something that happens that we think is so awful, it wakes us up, we take action, and then it creates some sort of better thing further on down the line. So I know we've all come here, we've woken up to some sort of terrible thing in our midst. And I really have to believe we're heading towards something really good. We're creating a groundswell. And Cece, what you're doing, the energy you put out to this, I mean, like, oh my God, where are your wings tucked behind you? I'm stunned.
They're right back there by my horn somewhere. I don't know.
The Thank you. Thank you. I won't go on, but thank you.
Well, and Sydney is out in California, and she has been working her tail off, not just for herself and her loved ones, but she has a very dear friend, and she and her husband have gone over there and helped the friend to create a safe sanctuary, because the friend is now right under a small cell, and she has been working her tail off with her community and her town and her state. So Sydney is a wonderful person to connect to. If anybody wants to meet with Cindy or Sydney, maybe you can drop your contact point in the chat too, Sydney. I also want to acknowledge that with us today is a wonderful woman, very smart, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Allison, and she has been very, very injured by man-made radio frequency radiation, as well as the dirty electricity in her living space, and it has just really taken her health from her. And she has been very brave, and she has testified with us on our Massachusetts bills. And I am hoping and praying that the new housing that she's been trying to secure will come through. She just told me today that she may very well have a new place to go where the radiation is much less. So Allison, our hearts and our love go out to you for your determination and all the research that you've thrown our way, because you've really looked at this from all angles to try and preserve your life and that of others. So thank you, Allison, and everybody else who's on here who understood this issue and continues to come to provide support and offer new information. We're just so grateful. So if there are no more questions.
I actually have, I
Go
just
ahead,
had two.
Jen.
They're super simple ones though, just in case anybody else had this question too. So I have some air tubes from Shield Your Body.
Yes.
They don't look anything like yours. Where did you get the hollow tube ones that you have from?
The one I got, I think I bought online with either Less EMF.
Okay.
Or Tech Wellness. I know she sells them out there too. And those are three companies that we've just mentioned. Shield Your Body is a gentleman by the name of R. Blank. His father was Dr. Martin Blank, who wrote the book Overpowered, and he was from Columbia University, and it was one of the world's leading researchers on this. If you watch Generation Zapped, you'll get to meet R's dad, Dr. Martin Blank. He was wonderful. And then there's lessemf.com, and lessemf.com has a lot of terrific products. I understand their tech support is really good. And then who else? Tech Wellness was one of the co-sponsors of the EMF Medical Conference, and they sell a lot of, stuff like this too. Again, your first line of defense is don't expose yourself. If you have to be exposed for any amount of time, do your best to create distance and shielding. So, all right. Did you have another question, Jenny?
Yeah, I wanted to know, you mentioned forwarding calls from the cell phone. Mm-hmm. I actually don't have, I have a flip phone now. I don't even have so I don't know how to do that, but just in case anybody wanted to know how to do that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
I couldn't find it when
I don't use my cell phone very much, but I know it's in here. Oh, in settings, go pretty far down, and you'll find phone. It just says phone.
Okay.
And in that, it's got a call forwarding option.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm kind of proud of myself. I remembered where to find it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. And it's no wonder I couldn't find it. Mine's not highlighted because I don't have a SIM card in there. So that makes sense.
That'll do it. But good for you for reducing your exposure that way, Jenny. That's awesome.
Yes. And it's only 4G. And I'm not connected to all the social media stuff and my email and everything. So yeah, it's been great.
Very good. Very good. All right, everybody, you've been so gracious to give us 2+ hours of your day, and we will look to turn that video plus my slides. So again, don't take our word on it. Go know it for yourself and come back again. Many people come back time and time again, either to keep learning, make a change, come back, pluck up the courage to do another change. Or to just like Sydney did, come and tell us some encouragement, because there's a lot of really good stuff going on. But it doesn't happen unless we be the change we want to see in our world. So thank you, everybody who is that and who might think they want to be, but don't know how to do it. We're here to help you. So have a tech safe day, everybody. Maybe we'll see you on the 25th at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.